So, brothers and sisters, throughout history, there have been moments when truths were revealed to the world, and those revelations changed the very course of human destiny. In the sacred writings that have been passed down to us, there are hidden treasures that shine a light on our past and illuminate the path forward. One such treasure is the Book of Jubilees, a text that offers profound insights into the early history of the Jewish people and the roots of Christian faith. Though often overlooked or excluded, the Book of Jubilees serves as a bridge connecting ancient traditions, sacred teachings, and divine revelations. It is a book that, despite being banned or disregarded by some, contains invaluable lessons about the divine order, the covenant between God and his people, and the understanding of God's timeline. Today we are going to explore the pivotal role the Book of Jubilees played in early Christian and Jewish history, and why its messages are as relevant today as they were in ancient times. A lost key to the Hebrew Scriptures, the Book of Jubilees holds within it a treasure trove of ancient wisdom, a key that, when found, opens up a deeper understanding of the Hebrew Scriptures. For centuries, the Book of Jubilees was considered a forbidden text, excluded from the canonical Bible by both the Jewish and Christian traditions. Yet, in the pages of this book, we uncover a crucial link to the ancient world that shaped the Jewish faith and the story of salvation. The Book of Jubilees is not just another apocryphal text. It is a significant work that sheds light on the history, culture, and theological understanding of early Judaism, offering a perspective that has been largely lost in the mainstream biblical narrative. At its core, the Book of Jubilees presents a retelling of the creation story, the lives of the patriarchs, and the covenant between God and his people, but it does so with a unique perspective. One of the most striking aspects of Jubilees is its structure. It organizes history into jubilees, or periods of 49 years. This method of division is not merely a numerical tool. It represents a theological framework that emphasizes the divine order of time. The text also offers a more detailed account of certain biblical events than what is found in Genesis and Exodus, and it provides insights into the nature of God's law, his covenant with Israel, and his expectations for his people. In many ways, the Book of Jubilees functions as a bridge, connecting the earliest chapters of the Bible with a deeper understanding of God's plan for humanity. One of the primary roles of the Book of Jubilees is its focus on the idea of sacred time. Time itself, according to the Book of Jubilees, is not merely a linear progression, but a series of divinely ordained cycles. These cycles are structured around the number 49, representing a perfect and holy period. The text emphasizes the importance of the Sabbath, the feast days, and the observance of God's commandments, all tied to this cyclical understanding of time. By organizing history into jubilees, the book underscores the significance of living in harmony with God's timing and divine plan. This focus on time is a crucial element of Jewish thought that is often overlooked in traditional readings of the Bible. Moreover, the Book of Jubilees offers a deeper exploration of the patriarchs and the early history of Israel. While Genesis provides a broad overview of the lives of figures like Adam, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Jubilees fills in many gaps, providing additional details about their lives, their actions, and their relationships with God. For example, it expands on the story of Noah's flood, offering a fuller account of his life and the covenant God made with him after the flood waters receded. Similarly, it highlights the lives of Abraham and his descendants, focusing on the covenant promises God made to them. These expanded narratives provide a richer context for understanding the spiritual heritage of the Jewish people. In addition to its historical and narrative content, the Book of Jubilees also serves as a theological text, offering insights into the nature of God's law. It stresses the importance of obedience to God's commandments, emphasizing that the law is not a mere set of rules, but a reflection of God's will for his people. The book underscores the significance of ritual observances, such as the Sabbath and the festivals which are central to Jewish religious life. By focusing on the law in this way, the Book of Jubilees reinforces the idea that the covenant between God and Israel is not only a matter of belief, but also a matter of practice, of living in accordance with divine principles. The Book of Jubilees also serves as a witness to the theological debates of its time. While it presents a more rigid, law-centered view of the covenant, it reflects the growing tensions within the Jewish community in the centuries leading up to the Common Era. Its emphasis on purity, the sanctity of time, and the importance of observing God's commandments speaks to a desire to preserve the faith against external influences, including Hellenism and the encroachment of foreign cultures. In this sense, the Book of Jubilees can be seen as a response to the challenges faced by the Jewish community during a period of political and cultural upheaval. In many ways, the Book of Jubilees fills in the gaps left by other biblical texts, offering a more nuanced and detailed understanding of the ancient Hebrew worldview. It provides a lens through which we can view the development of Jewish thought, culture, and theology. Though it was not included in the traditional biblical canon, its teachings have influenced both Jewish and Christian traditions in profound ways. Its focus on sacred time, the law, and the covenant provides a deeper understanding of the spiritual foundations that shaped early Jewish and Christian beliefs. As we rediscover the Book of Jubilees, we gain access to a richer, more complex understanding of the biblical narrative, one that connects us to the ancient past and offers valuable lessons for our spiritual journey today. The Book of Jubilees and the Law of Moses. The Book of Jubilees plays a significant role in understanding the Law of Moses and its application within the framework of ancient Israelite society. Written during a time when Jewish identity was being forged under external pressures and internal religious reforms, the Book of Jubilees serves as a critical theological document that emphasizes the continuity and sacredness of God's commandment. It was not merely a retelling of events, but a reaffirmation of the law, showing its divine authority and eternal relevance. Through its teachings, we see that the law is not just a set of external rules, but a living testament to the relationship between God and his people, reflecting the divine order that governs not just the lives of individuals, but the very structure of the world. At the core of the Book of Jubilees is a deep reverence for the commandments given to Moses on Mount Sinai. While the Torah as we know it provides a broad outline of these commandments, the Book of Jubilees offers a more detailed and specific understanding of how these laws should be observed. It reiterates the importance of following God's instructions precisely, emphasizing the idea that true worship is not only about faith, but also about obedience to divine order. It also highlights the consequences of disobedience, stressing that failure to uphold the law leads to separation from God's blessings. By elevating the law to this divine status, the Book of Jubilees ensures that the Israelites understand that their very existence as a nation depends on their faithfulness to the covenant. One of the most significant ways the Book of Jubilees expands on the law of Moses is through its treatment of the Sabbath and other holy days. It introduces a detailed account of the creation story and how the seventh day was set aside as a day of rest, reminding the people that the Sabbath is not simply a ritual, but a sign of God's sovereignty over time. The Book of Jubilees emphasizes that the observance of the Sabbath is not just a command, but a symbol of the eternal covenant between God and Israel. This connection between the Sabbath and the covenant is important because it underlines that the law is more than a list of do's and don'ts. It is a divine structure that binds the people of Israel to God's eternal purpose. For the Israelites, to keep the Sabbath holy is to align themselves with God's divine rhythm, allowing them to experience his rest and peace. Additionally, the Book of Jubilees expounds on the various festivals and feasts that are outlined in the Torah. While the Torah gives us a basic framework for understanding these observances, the Book of Jubilees gives specific instructions on how they should be observed, the rituals involved, and the significance of each feast in the life of the Israelites. It focuses on the importance of purity and holiness in every aspect of worship, reminding the people that God is present in the details of their lives, and he expects his people to live in accordance with his laws at all times. The festivals are not mere cultural practices. They are deeply spiritual moments that allow the Israelites to reconnect with God and remember his mighty acts of salvation. Furthermore, the Book of Jubilees provides a unique perspective on the history of Israel, placing a significant emphasis on the role of the patriarchs and their relationship to the law. It shows that the observance of the law was not something new that began at Sinai, but rather it was part of a divine tradition that began with the first humans and was passed down through the generations. In this way, the Book of Jubilees reinforces the idea that the law is not a temporal set of rules, but a divine order that existed before time itself, woven into the fabric of creation. By tracing the observance of the law back to Adam, Noah, and the patriarchs, Jubilees underscores that the commandments were always part of God's plan for humanity. This portrayal of the law as an eternal and unchanging principle elevates it beyond a historical document to a spiritual truth that transcends time. The Book of Jubilees also addresses the importance of purity and holiness in the community. It teaches that maintaining the sanctity of the law requires not only individual obedience, but communal responsibility. The people of Israel are reminded that their obedience to the law affects the entire nation, and disobedience can lead to collective consequences. This understanding of the law as something that governs not only personal morality, but also the social and political life of the people emphasizes the communal nature of the covenant. The law, according to the Book of Jubilees, is not just a private affair between an individual and God, but it is a corporate responsibility that binds the people together in a shared commitment to holiness. In the context of early Judaism, the Book of Jubilees reflects the increasing importance of the law as a defining feature of Jewish identity. In the face of Hellenistic influences and the challenges posed by foreign rule, texts like Jubilees reinforce the idea that Israel's distinctiveness as a people depended on their unwavering commitment to God's commandments. The Book of Jubilees, therefore, acts as both a preservation of the past and a call to the future. It reminds the Israelites of the importance of maintaining their covenant with God and staying true to the laws that define them as His people. In sum, the Book of Jubilees provides a rich, detailed understanding of the law of Moses, one that connects the commandments to a divine, eternal order that transcends time and history. It reaffirms that the law is not simply a set of rules, but a way of life, a path to holiness, and a reflection of God's will for His people. It calls the Israelites and all of us to live in alignment with divine time, to honor God's presence in every aspect of our lives, and to recognize that obedience to God's law is the foundation of our relationship with Him. The Book of Jubilees and Christian Origins. The Book of Jubilees, though primarily a Jewish work, played a subtle yet profound role in shaping the environment from which early Christianity emerged. When we look closely, we can see that the concerns, themes, and theological emphases of Jubilees form part of the spiritual soil in which Christian thought would later take root. The Book of Jubilees was highly regarded among certain Jewish sects, especially those like the Essenes at Qumran, whose values and worldview strongly influenced the early Christian community. Understanding Jubilees allows us to grasp the atmosphere of expectation, covenant loyalty, and apocalyptic hope that surrounded the birth of the church and the message of Jesus Christ. One of the most crucial ways the Book of Jubilees connects to Christian origins is through its focus on covenant faithfulness and the promise of divine intervention in human history. Jubilees stresses that history is not random, but divinely orchestrated, unfolding according to a heavenly timeline. This concept of history being under God's control, moving toward a decisive moment of redemption, mirrors the Christian belief in the coming of the Messiah and the final fulfillment of God's promises. Early Christians believed that Jesus' life, death, and resurrection fulfilled this divine timetable. Although Jubilees does not directly mention Christ, its theological structure, its view of history, time, and covenant prepared the Jewish mind to expect a climactic intervention from God, setting the stage for the message of the gospel to be both understood and embraced by those familiar with its teachings. Another major theme in Jubilees that would resonate with early Christianity is the emphasis on spiritual purity and moral living. Jubilees presents a very high view of holiness, calling Israel to live separately from the surrounding nations and avoid contamination through intermarriage and idolatry. Early Christians inherited this strong sense of being a called-out people, a holy community distinct from the world. The language of being set apart echoes powerfully in the New Testament, especially in the writings of Paul, where believers are called saints, those set apart for God's purposes. The seeds planted by Jubilees' teachings on holiness and covenant loyalty would blossom in Christian teachings about the new covenant community formed by faith in Jesus Christ. Finally, the apocalyptic tone of Jubilees, its expectation of future judgment and the restoration of all things, would resonate powerfully with early Christians living under Roman oppression. The promise that God would set things right, that the righteous would be vindicated, and that the covenant would be eternally fulfilled, gave hope to a struggling, persecuted church. This hope fueled the Christian message that in Christ the kingdom of God had come, and that one day it would be fully realized in power and glory. In these ways, the Book of Jubilees is not a distant, irrelevant relic, but an important witness to the religious world that birthed Christianity. Its theological emphases on covenant, holiness, divine justice, and eschatological hope deeply shaped the atmosphere into which the gospel was proclaimed. Even today, by studying the Book of Jubilees, we gain a richer understanding of the roots of our faith and the divine story that continues to unfold through history. The Book of Jubilees as a tool for unity and identity. The Book of Jubilees was far more than just a historical retelling. It was a powerful tool designed to unify a scattered and often struggling people under a shared identity, rooted in covenant, purpose, and divine destiny. In times when Jewish communities faced the threat of foreign domination, cultural erosion, and internal division, the Book of Jubilees offered them a sacred narrative that tied their past, present, and future into one continuous story, authored by God Himself. It emphasized that they were not just another nation among many, but a chosen people with a holy calling, bound together by divine promises and a shared spiritual history that transcended borders, languages, and circumstances. By meticulously recounting the stories of the patriarchs and linking every major event to God's commands and covenants, the Book of Jubilees strengthened a sense of collective memory. It wasn't merely telling stories for entertainment. It was engraving into the hearts of the people who they were and why they mattered. Every law, every feast, every act of faithfulness by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was framed as a direct inheritance for all the descendants of Israel. This deepened the community's sense of belonging. They were not individuals wandering through a meaningless life. They were the living continuation of a sacred history, personally and corporately responsible for carrying forward the purposes of God. In a time when Hellenistic influence threatened to water down Jewish distinctiveness, the Book of Jubilees served as a rallying cry for purity and devotion. It urged the people to resist assimilation, to remember their calling, and to hold fast to the traditions that set them apart. This sense of divine difference was not about arrogance, but about purpose. They were to be a light to the nations, and that light could not shine if it were diluted by compromise. The call to maintain dietary laws, to keep the Sabbath with strict devotion, and to celebrate the festivals according to divine instruction was about far more than ritual. It was about survival, identity, and mission. The law was the visible sign of the invisible covenant. And Jubilees made it clear that fidelity to the law was fidelity to God Himself. Beyond cultural preservation, the Book of Jubilees infused hope into a people often battered by oppression and exile. It reminded them that no matter how powerful foreign empires seemed, history itself was under God's control, meticulously divided into jubilees and weeks of years. Every moment was accounted for, every promise would be fulfilled. Their suffering was not evidence of abandonment, but part of a larger divine plan leading to ultimate restoration. This powerful eschatological hope kept the people from despair. It taught them to see beyond their immediate troubles to the guaranteed triumph of God's purposes. It taught them to see themselves not as victims of history, but as key players in a cosmic drama destined for divine victory. Unity was also fostered through the way the Book of Jubilees emphasized a shared moral and spiritual code. All the tribes of Israel, despite their geographical dispersion, were to live by the same laws, honor the same covenants, and await the same promises. The text broke down barriers that might have arisen from distance or circumstance. Whether one lived in Jerusalem or in the farthest reaches of the diaspora, one's identity remained firmly anchored in the God of Abraham, the covenant of Sinai, and the unfolding story that began at creation itself. It called the people to live as one body, bound together not by human kings or political borders, but by divine command. This sense of unity and shared destiny is something that still speaks to communities of faith today. In a world divided by race, politics, economics, and ideology, the message of the Book of Jubilees is a timely reminder that true unity is found not in uniformity, but in shared covenant and purpose. It teaches that identity grounded in God's truth is stronger than the shifting tides of culture. It calls believers to stand firm, to remember who they are, and to live in such a way that their lives bear witness to a greater reality. The Book of Jubilees, then, is not simply an ancient text to be studied. It is a living challenge to any generation seeking to remain faithful amidst chaos. It reminds us that our unity is born of divine election, our identity is shaped by divine law, and our hope is secured by divine promise. In clinging to the story God has written, we find our place, our people, and our power. The Book of Jubilees and the preservation of African heritage. The Book of Jubilees, though often overlooked in modern times, holds profound significance when we consider its role in the preservation of African heritage and identity. This sacred text, treasured within the Ethiopian tradition, offers a bold counter-narrative to many of the historical distortions that have marginalized Africa's role in biblical history. By preserving the ancient stories in a detailed and structured form, the Book of Jubilees connects Africa not merely as a geographical footnote, but as a vital, chosen participant in the unfolding story of God's covenant with humanity. In doing so, it becomes a testament to the dignity, divine purpose, and enduring spiritual legacy of African peoples. In the pages of Jubilees, we find the land of Cush, the descendants of Ham, and the mighty lineage that would eventually connect to nations and peoples across Africa. Rather than being portrayed negatively, as later European interpretations often tried to suggest, these descendants are presented with dignity and importance. Jubilees outlines the inheritance of lands by Noah's sons after the flood, clearly situating parts of Africa as legitimate and God-ordained territories for flourishing nations. This narrative reaffirms that Africa was not an outsider to God's plans, but a vital part of the original distribution of blessings following humanity's rebirth after the flood. The Ethiopian tradition, which preserved the Book of Jubilees faithfully when it was lost to the Western world, showcases Africa's role as a guardian of sacred knowledge. Long before European Christianity acknowledged these texts, Ethiopian Christians revered Jubilees alongside other ancient scriptures. This act of preservation was not just about keeping an old book safe. It was about protecting a worldview that honored African identity within God's design. In this way, Ethiopia and broader African heritage stand as living witnesses to the faithfulness of a people who held fast to the truth even when much of the world forgot or dismissed it. Moreover, the detailed genealogies and historical recounting in Jubilees serve as a powerful reminder that African peoples have deep ancestral connections to the earliest chapters of sacred history. These connections are not myths or later additions. They are woven into the very structure of the biblical story, as preserved through Jubilees. When modern descendants of Africa read these pages, they can see themselves not as strangers to the faith, but as sons and daughters of a legacy stretching back to the dawn of humanity. They can reclaim their rightful place in the story of salvation, knowing that their roots are anchored in divine purpose and ancient covenant. The moral teachings of Jubilees also resonate deeply with African traditions of community, respect for elders, and reverence for divine authority. The strong emphasis on family, justice, and obedience to God reflects values that have been central to African societies for millennia. Thus, Jubilees not only preserves historical facts, but also cultural and spiritual wisdom that aligns with the best of African heritage. It bridges the ancient faith with indigenous values, demonstrating that God's truth speaks across cultures and honors the dignity of all peoples. Additionally, the Book of Jubilees offers a prophetic hope that resonates with the African spirit of resilience. In times of suffering, colonization, and systemic oppression, Africa's story has often been twisted or silenced. Yet Jubilees reminds us that God sees, remembers, and restores. Just as he preserved his promises through generations of faithful believers, he continues to honor the faith and endurance of African descendants who cling to his truth despite centuries of adversity. The very survival of the Book of Jubilees within the Ethiopian church stands as a prophetic symbol of Africa's spiritual survival and destined resurgence. In recognizing the role of Jubilees, we are not simply reclaiming a lost book. We are reclaiming a lost history, a lost dignity, and a lost affirmation that Africa has always been part of God's redemptive plan. It calls modern believers, especially those of African descent, to lift their heads, to know their true identity, and to walk boldly in the knowledge that they are heirs to a sacred heritage. The Book of Jubilees becomes a bridge between the ancient past and the present, linking generations through faith, history, and the unbroken promises of God. The enduring relevance of the Book of Jubilees. The Book of Jubilees, though written thousands of years ago, holds a striking and enduring relevance for today's world. In an age of rapid change, moral confusion, and historical amnesia, Jubilees offers a voice from the ancient past that speaks directly into the heart of modern struggles. It calls people back to a sense of divine purpose, rooted identity, and the reality that history itself is not a random series of events, but a carefully guided journey under the hand of God. The Book of Jubilees reminds humanity that the same principles that governed the faithful of old are still the foundations upon which a meaningful and righteous life must be built today. One of the most powerful aspects of Jubilees' relevance is its insistence on covenant loyalty. At a time when loyalty is often treated as a disposable virtue, Jubilees reminds readers that covenant, sacred promise between God and his people, is central to true identity and destiny. In a world fractured by broken promises and shifting allegiances, the idea that one's life is anchored in a relationship with the eternal God offers stability and hope. Ceremony. Jubilees teaches that God's promises are sure, but they demand faithfulness in return. This is a truth that modern believers must recover if they are to live lives marked by purpose rather than aimlessness. Another way the Book of Jubilees maintains its relevance is through its emphasis on holy living. In an era where morality is increasingly seen as relative and subjective, Jubilees draws a clear line. There is a way that leads to life, and there is a way that leads to destruction. It is not for human beings to define what is right and wrong. It is God who has established the laws of righteousness from the beginning of time. Jubilees' insistence on obedience to divine law is not about oppression or legalism, but about flourishing. It teaches that real freedom is found not in doing whatever one pleases, but in living according to the order God designed for human thriving. Another way the Book of Jubilees maintains its relevance is through its emphasis on holy living. In an era where morality is increasingly seen as relative and subjective, Jubilees draws a clear line. There is a way that leads to life, and there is a way that leads to destruction. It is not for human beings to define what is right and wrong. It is God who has established the laws of righteousness from the beginning of time. Jubilees' insistence on obedience to divine law is not about oppression or legalism, but about flourishing. It teaches that real freedom is found not in doing whatever one pleases, but in living according to the order God designed for human thriving. The Book of Jubilees also speaks powerfully into questions of history and heritage. In a modern world where historical revisionism often erases or distorts the stories of certain peoples and cultures, Jubilees stands as a guardian of memory. It preserves the genealogies, the covenants, and the sacred milestones that define who God's people are and where they come from. For communities that have been marginalized or told that their history does not matter, Jubilees is a sacred reminder that God records, remembers, and honors every generation. It restores dignity and roots people firmly in the sacred flow of divine history. Moreover, Jubilees' portrayal of time divided into jubilees and sabbatical cycles offers a profound counter-narrative to the frantic pace of modern life. Today's world is obsessed with speed, consumption, and instant gratification. Jubilees teaches the wisdom of sacred rhythms, times of work, times of rest, times of celebration, and times of repentance. It reminds humanity that life is not a race to be won, but a pilgrimage to be walked with reverence and intentionality. By returning to these sacred rhythms, individuals and communities can rediscover balance, peace, and alignment with God's timing. Finally, the apocalyptic hope of Jubilees continues to inspire believers facing a world filled with injustice, suffering, and uncertainty. The book teaches that history is moving toward a divine conclusion, where evil will be judged, righteousness will be vindicated, and God's kingdom will reign forever. This hope is not escapism, it is fuel for endurance. It empowers the faithful to stand firm, to work for justice, and to trust that their labor in the Lord is never in vain. In every way, the Book of Jubilees speaks with a voice that transcends its ancient setting. It is a call to faithfulness, a beacon of identity, a guide to holy living, a protector of history, a keeper of sacred rhythms, and a herald of ultimate hope. Its message is as urgent today as it was when it was first written, reminding all who read it that the path to life remains unchanged, illuminated by the unshakable promises of the living God.